I didn't see that.
Okay. The Oregon City Planning Commission hearing for December 12th, 2011 is called to order.
Actually, the meeting's called to order. We haven't opened the hearing yet.
The meeting is called to order. Our first order of business is any public comment not on the agenda. Do we have any?
Not have any tonight.
None. Next item of business is the adoption of the Planning Commission meetings for June 27th, 2011.
I would like to move they be approved as written.
Second.
Commissioner Mabey,
Aye.
Commissioner Hankin,
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Chair Kidwell.
Aye.
Carries.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Water Master Plan update continuation.
Good evening, Chair Kidwell and Planning Commissioners. This is a continuation of Planning File L10-02, which is the Water Master Plan update. It was continued from October 24th, 2011. The applicant is Oregon City Public Works Department, and I've got a brief PowerPoint to go over some of the review considerations, and then Nancy Krashar is available to answer any outstanding questions you might have. I also included in your packet for this meeting a list of questions that we received from Commissioner McGriff. We included responses to those questions as well as some general questions that the Planning Commission had at the previous meeting. That deals with some of the more technical aspects of the Water Master Plan as well as some of the questions that you raised at the previous meeting. If you've had a chance to review those responses and are comfortable with them, I won't go into much detail, but if you have any questions about those, let me know. Let's see. The Water Master Plan that we're reviewing is an ancillary document that supports the city's adopted comprehensive plan. It was last updated when we did the 2004 comprehensive plan. It's intended to provide operational guidance to city departments in planning and carrying out city services, and as such they do require updating more frequently than the comprehensive plan. Other ancillary documents are a Trails Master Plan, Sewer Plan, Stormwater Plan, and things like that. The review process for these types of files is a legislative review process, so the considerations are the same as if we were reviewing a comprehensive plan. And those four considerations that we need to address. The first is the plan implementation process. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Whether the plan is adequate to guide land use actions, including an examination of trends. Whether the plan still reflects the community's needs, desires, attitudes, and conditions, including changing demographics and economics. And the addition of updated factual information, including that made available to the city by various regional, state, and federal government agencies. The first consideration is the plan implementation process. So for the Water Master Plan, public notice is an important part of it, and this includes notice to governmental entities, special districts, providers of urban services, neighborhood associations, and notice that is provided to any requesting party. We also provided notice in the newspaper, as well as with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And since the previous meeting and prior to the previous Planning Commission hearing, the applicant conducted a variety of public outreach meetings, work sessions, open houses, hearings, and we've also included information on the city's website, as well as a flyer, I believe that was in the water bill, Or,
It was
was-
a notification of the meeting
Meeting.
time.
oh, notice of
Was
the
not a
meeting
separate
times.
plan.
Okay. All right. And we've included a couple of the presentations that were given to the CIC and to the public in general that were both held here at City Hall since then as exhibits in your staff report. And to that end, we found that the plan implementation process is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with statewide planning goals. Second review consideration is whether this plan is adequate to guide land use actions. As you know, the plan includes a detailed analysis of the existing water system. There is an existing and projected future water demand analysis, an examination of service standards, what's called a hydraulic model, a capital improvement program, and various financing scenarios, including a funding recommendation. So the plan provides a comprehensive review of the water distribution system within the urban growth boundary and provides an adequate guide for future land use actions and the development of criteria to be used in land use actions. Third review consideration is whether the plan still reflects community needs, desires, attitudes, and conditions, including changing demographics and economics. So within the city's urban growth boundary, we have adopted comprehensive plan designations. We have adopted zoning designations within the city limit. And each one of the concept plans and zoning changes that have been made over time have been made consistent with this review consideration. Those legislative actions that have gone before have helped ensure that the water system that we have is adequate to support the projected level of demand within our urban growth boundary. It does not provide a timeline for how quickly growth will occur. It just provides a guide for how to get there. And subsequently, based on these projections that have been done, we found that the orderly extension of water service that's anticipated and provided for in the plan can accommodate the projected growth envisioned in the city's comprehensive plan, and that's consistent with this consideration. Finally, the update is necessary to include the updated factual information made available to the city since the last water master plan was adopted. And that is incorporated in the plan and includes new water demand analyses, new land use considerations such as the Park Place concept planning area, usage data, financing information, maintenance information, and ratepayer information, among a variety of other new data. And the staff report that we've prepared includes detailed findings of compliance with the City of Oregon City Comprehensive Plan and with the statewide planning goals. So the recommendation for coming from the Planning Commission to the City Commission is based on whether you feel that the Water Master Plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the statewide land use goals. And one of the questions that has been raised by the Commission is, can the Planning Commission make a recommendation on the Water Master Plan as a guiding document and an ancillary document to the comprehensive plan, given the fact that the City Commission has not adopted a final funding scenario or addressed the rollback of water rates? And staff is confident that you can make this recommendation as long as you acknowledge that under any of the financing scenarios identified, adequate water service can be made available to serve planned development, including the urban growth boundary expansion areas. And staff therefore recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this water distribution system master plan as an ancillary document to the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan for the City Commission to consider on January 18th, 2012. We'll also be having a work session tomorrow to discuss in more detail the funding scenarios, the water master plan in general, and to discuss what kinds of actions the City Commission will need to take to address Chapter 9 and water rollback. You have any questions? Oops.
I don't have a question, but I appreciate that you took into consideration the concern that the Commission has about specifically recommending any or all of the financing plans, and I think the language that you used in the staff report is non-committal, but also addresses the fact that whatever financing plan is chosen can be met by the plan, and I really appreciate that.
Other questions?
Well, yeah, I guess my question is under financing plan scenario 2, either A or B, it doesn't look to me like the city can meet its obligations. Operating expenses exceed revenues by a significant amount in some of the plans. So how can the staff say that they can meet their obligations if they don't have the revenue to do that?
Well, as a physical infrastructure plan, basically the projections, the way I understand it is the projections that have been made determine physical pipe sizes and things of that nature that are incorporated into either a capital improvement program or a system development charge, system development charges that developers will pay when the growth occurs. And to that end, the plan can work, assuming those SDC charges are updated and incorporated after adoption of the plan. So that's my short answer. Nancy, do you have any other responses?
I think I might ask the city attorney for some input here. What I understand is that the master plan and the capital improvement program can be adopted that charts the course, and then the actual finance strategy can be selected after, which even for both system development charges and rates for operations and maintenance. And Carrie, do you have something to add to that? Because it seems like you explained it fairly well to me.
It's a planning document. We're planning for future growth, not serving existing customers. So the city's obligation to serve existing customers is a separate question. This plan, for purposes of serving prospective growth, if the developer isn't going to fund it and the developer can't show that SDCs are in place to fund it, the development won't be approved.
Right.
So that's the reality of those different financing scenarios, and the only obligation the Planning Commission has, and the City Commission for that matter too, is to identify feasible conceptual financing mechanisms. And we've identified a number of scenarios that do that.
So the document isn't, the water master plan isn't a plan on how we're going to provide water to me as a current resident?
I think it will have that effect, but it doesn't have to do that for purposes of land use planning, because we're planning for future growth. The city's obligation to serve its existing customers is a municipal obligation that exists independent of this plan.
So we have, I guess my difficulty is with that whole concept that this is the plan for providing water to the city of Oregon City. And yeah, whether it's today or tomorrow or in 2050. And it clearly shows that if something isn't done in 2015, we will not be providing water to the residents of Oregon City, whether they're new or old residents, without some sort of service impact. And whether that's pump stations not operating, whether that's gunk buildup in pipes, whether that's loss of service due to tree root intrusions, or 48 to 72 hour response times for emergencies. I mean, that seems like that's what the master water plan should be dealing with. And I don't have a problem with scenario 2 being bleak. I guess, in fact, it needs to be, that's a reality that's out there. The other element of scenario 2 is that our SDCs will be so astronomically high in order to bridge the gap that no one will build, which again means no revenue, which again means no capital improvements. And some of these are capital improvements just to maintain infrastructure. So, I guess what I would be looking at is, if we did this, would be to go, and I'm not making a motion because I have other questions, but would be something along the lines of recommending approval of the plan while strongly discouraging, or strongly encouraging alternatives to either of scenario 2s. Something along those lines that, look, we need to fix this stuff. We need to maintain this stuff. Scenario 2, which is current reality, is a non-viable option. And I think that's incumbent upon us as a planning commission to send up the flares and say, current situations are our plan's going to fail. So city commission and developers and everybody else need to sit up and do something. So whether it's alternative 1 or alternative 3 or alternative 67, sure ain't 2. So,
but you need to understand what they're showing in this plan is what's needed for the growth. The decision on the funding of it is a separate process. You could certainly make a recommendation, but at this point, we're not adopting a financing method to move forward. The City Commission is going to have to come back and address that, whether it be through a policy decision that they make or if they're going to do public involvement and outreach to build consensus and understanding to set a new rate. We've got a court case that we need to deal with. We have a charter amendment that we have to deal with. So there's a lot of unknowns. So what this document is doing is showing what those alternatives are. You could certainly make a recommendation, but at this point, we're not at a stage to even begin entertaining a financial alternative because of the unknowns that are out there right now.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the approval of this, or the recommendation that this go to the City Commission based on adequacy, is it shows all the pipe sizes and storage that's needed to serve the UGB. And then how...
Well, to serve the build-out.
And then we go, right, exactly. And then we go to review our system development charges based on this capital improvement program, and we go to City Commission to review our rates. That's what you'd do if we weren't under this charter thing. And when we review those rates because of the charter, it'll be a pretty robust conversation. Not a pretty robust. It will be a very robust conversation from my position to make sure that we can provide adequate services for our customers. And having something from the Planning Commission, we would appreciate that sort of indicates that there is some concern from this board, this body, about that. But that's strictly up to the Planning Commission.
Tony, the one thing I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Damon was saying is after we had our previous 2 hearings, I've attended public meetings in both occasions and gathered more information. I've taken the time to look at the master plan document, and I don't believe that the funding issue is primarily connected to new growth. In fact, it was made clear in all of the presentations that the funding for the operations and maintenance, the ongoing expenses, had nothing to do with those capital improvement projects, and yet there's still a shortfall if the rates are rolled back. So my personal opinion is that technically the water master plan looks like it works fine, and it makes a lot of sense. And if there were no financial component to it, I wouldn't have any problem supporting it as it's presented. But the funding component And as I stated at the last meeting, I think it's incumbent, if we're going to be voting on a financing option here, that one of the financing options should, I think it must, allow for the rollback and still meet the budget obligations of the city. And as Damon pointed out, it doesn't do that. And that's completely independent from the build-out issue.
And I don't think we're asking for your selection of one of the funding scenarios. They're all presented, and from what I can see, there's not it doesn't say this is the funding scenario that is chosen for this master plan. It presents the numbers and shows that with really all of them except for increases, that you are going to be in the red. So I don't think I don't think it's saying here that these funding scenarios are going to provide you a sustainable water system. I think the funding scenario that recommends increases is the one that says this produces a sustainable water system, and that is something the City Commission has to vote on.
One of the issues that I have a real concern, and I think this skews all of the funding options pretty significantly, is at one of the previous meetings it was brought to our attention that there's a large amount of money being set aside into a building reserve for a future public work center. And in looking at the three different scenarios between all three of those, there's a pretty significant amount of money being set aside each year, and depending on which scenario would be adopted, it ranges from $2.5 to $6 million being set aside for something that's not directly related to water service delivery or maintenance of the system.
Well, I think it does have
is.
some.
It is.
though.
It is related.
Well, it's related in the sense that it's a support building. And so
It takes people.
I just have a serious question about how that relates to the budget shortfall of delivering the operations and maintenance for the system. And with that built into the system, we're seeing a shortfall in being able to deliver the obligation of the city with the rollback of the rates.
I guess I'll let Nancy respond a little bit there, but I mean, in terms of a building, a facility that is directly related to the provision and the ability to provide and maintain that service, putting it into the fees collected for that service is exactly the appropriate place to put it. You would see the same things from sanitary sewer, I imagine, but I'll let Nancy,
Right.
you have much better knowledge of what's going on
Yes.
with your budget, but to just say that should be taken out of the user cost and put it, that honestly, to me, would be a policy discussion that the City Commission would have to have in terms of how they're setting up their approved budgets every year. And if we're going to take it out of there, that money needs to come from somewhere. And if it's going to come out of general fund, that's something that they need to decide. But it's a direct tie between the service you're getting and how that is paid for. And a building, a vehicle are needed infrastructure in order to maintain that infrastructure and service. So that's the thought reason why it's in there.
Right.
And I understand where you're coming from, what happens if you take it out, but I'll let Nancy talk a little bit more about that.
I guess I'd like to provide a little bit of background. The City Commission has determined that a new public works facility is needed. We had originally thought about staying where we are and rebuilding, and now they've asked us to go find another site. And in these funding scenarios, based on existing plans, we don't know what the City Commission might decide after they start looking at these numbers even. So based on the existing approach to building a new facility, I've included to set aside between $400,000 and $500,000 a year for the next 4 years into a building fund, so we can start having money to pay for this new facility. Once the rate rollback occurs, I'm not putting any money into that building fund in the scenarios because that's silly, in my opinion. So The thing that Tony did mention is indeed the building, a new building facility for Public Works would be funded through all of the utilities, not just water. And we come up with a way that shows some proportionality so that it's defensible in terms of the rate structure. And but water rates, sewer rates, stormwater rates, utilities it is acceptable to use the rates to pay for facilities. If the city commission says nope, then we wouldn't. But that's all part of the budgeting process. Does that help answer your question or concern at all?
So the money being allocated from the Water Master Plan funding is just a portion of how much the...
Right.
And
right.
So
And these are just projections. Every budget year we have a new budget, and the city commission adopts a new budget. There may be some years where they go, oh, we're not going to do that. This is a projection of what could be considered in the future.
And this is based on existing policy and existing
Right.
direction that we have from the city commission, that this is
Right.
the appropriate place to be doing that. Like you said, if we go through the budget committee and whenever we do that, in April this year, or whenever that's going to be, if they change the priorities, the goals, and the budget scenarios, then we adapt to that and make those changes as directed.
And then the alternative to that, if you were to remove those monies or that allocation out of the Water Master Plan, if you absolutely had to build a new public works facility, where would the money come from? General plan?
It'd probably come from general fund, or you'd have to go out for a bond.
Yeah,
Or
even with setting money into a savings account for a new facility, there is the likelihood that to build the entire facility in a new location would require a bond anyway. So that's
Unless we're going to wait for quite a while.
That's another bridge to cross in the future. But the facilities are needed, and there's processes to get there.
So, and basically, I'm speaking from past experience, but should in, say, the 2013 budget where you have, I'm just going to use a number, 400,000 set aside, if South Fork has to increase their cost to you and it's more than you'd projected, and the city council said you need to absorb that, not pass it on, that's one of the locations where you'd decrease that 400,000 to maybe 120,000 to eat the rate increase.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
That would be a possibility.
Yeah.
Tony, I was wondering, is it feasible for us to approve the master plan without endorsement of any of the funding scenarios and just leave that out of our deliberation?
It's very similar to when we do a concept plan out in the UGB area, where we identify funding sources to show compliance and a way to fund the infrastructure costs, but we're not asked to adopt any funding source at that point, because there's so much more work that needs to go into it. That's a bigger decision than just land use. At that
Right.
point, you're getting into taxing authority and
SDC rate.
and
Well, that's
financial
exactly
commi-
my concern, is
Right.
that we're being asked to review something that we have no authority to make any decisions about. So when it comes to rate structure, taxation, bonds, or whatever, that's really city council's responsibility.
And how they want to do that, whether they want to take that responsibility amongst themselves and deal with it there, or do they send it to another committee to deal with, or how you do that, I think, is up in the air. So, this is really the first step.
Right.
It's setting the baseline on what the services are that are needed, and then you take that next step, if this gets adopted, of, okay, how do we implement it and to what level?
So we could pass a resolution to recommend that this go to the city council absent a recommendation for any of the funding scenarios.
Certainly could, yes. Because they're all on the table, and every scenario is not spelled out in this document either. There may be another one
Right.
that may come out of a public process or a new decision on policy. So these are just
Right. I would
beginning
expect
framework.
there's going to be a lot of deliberation about it, and way beyond what we have the capability of even evaluating.
In this case, it's even more unique in that you have this charter requirement, which is going to need a vote of the people, which
Exactly.
is something you have absolutely no control over at this point.
Is there any other questions for Pete?
I don't know if it's for Pete or the attorney, but the well water rights question. In reading the staff response, I kind of hear it's a really, I forgot to silence my phone, sorry. That it's a really difficult question and it's not a crisis, so we don't think we need to deal with it right now. Is that an adequate summation of
Not
it?
exactly.
I'll defer to
Okay.
the city attorney on that.
Not exactly. The answer is it's difficult to find out the extent of groundwater rights. Most of them come from licenses, which aren't transferable to the city. So finding out where they are would be time consuming. The other problem is that it's likely that anyone who has an actual right rather than a license would be a large landholder. And there just aren't that many large landholders in these expansion areas. I mean, other than the golf course, I couldn't think of any. So if we narrowed it down and we said, okay, we'll only take the large landholders and we'll figure those folks out, that would only be 2 or 3 individuals. And then we have the question of the rough proportionality that would have to follow in order to take those rights from the golf course, for example, as part of an annexation proposal. And there have been local governments have had some difficulties in doing that in the past. And so we sort of decided, Tony and I, that it wasn't really worth looking at further if there wasn't really a sense that this was going to result in much. I'm happy to go back and dig further and we could take the golf course as an example and we could find out if they have water rights.
Well, do you know if CRW's million-gallon-a-day well is a permit or a water right?
I don't know that.
Okay, because my concern is, not this year, not even 5 years from now, but 10, 15 years from now when the Clackamas is being sucked dry and the fish, huggers are screaming and hollering and, well, if I can call them tree huggers, I can call them fish huggers. And everybody's fighting over the river, and we just have to wait out decades-long court cases rather than just turn on a well like West Lynn can do, or enter into potentially expensive water wheeling arrangements with other entities. The most likely one being CRW, which the city of Oregon City got into a big lawsuit with, and they may not feel too amenable to being nice to us in return at some point down the line. So I just think it's a kind of a necessary protection for emergency situations. If 1 or 2 strategic things were struck by evil, nefarious people, or even just a traffic accident, we're at the mercy of other forces, and it'd sure be nice to be like West Lynn, turn on a well and meet the needs in the interim.
I think that in this case, we need some direction from the commission on how you want to handle this, because we see not only proportionality issues associated with exacting this during an annexation, exacting water rights from a property owner to annex into the city. First big issue right there. And then the second one is how much, if you feel this is a significant thing as a group, we need, so I'm asking for some direction here from this group on if you want us to continue down this, investigating this, or are you comfortable with what the master plan has put together, or because this has come up again, and staff has given our response at this point.
Well, and I guess really to simplify where my concern is, would be whether or not we as the Planning Commission add that recommendation that the city explore the feasibility of adding or acquiring wells to our water supply system. And whether that means that in some of the properties that we own where we're near an aquifer, that we go ahead and drill our own well, or whether there's, the golf course has wells, and maybe we, purchase the wells from them when we annex, or reach an agreement with them that they would supply water in an emergency. I mean, I
Yeah.
just have a real concern that at some point we're gonna.
There's also the issue of the city really isn't a approved water supplier. We're a distribution system, and South Fork is the water supply. So it's probably something we'd want to engage South Fork in the conversation also.
Well, West Lynn owns and maintains
Yes.
their own wells, so they're us. So how do they do it, and should we do something similar?
I didn't
with-
know about Westland's wells. I'm sorry. I don't.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that would really be, I guess, the functional recommendation is that the city explore the feasibility and plan for, if necessary, plan for the acquisition or installation of wells to supplement our water supply. That would be absolutely acceptable to me, as opposed to, I understand the whole takings thing. It just seems simple on its surface. But,
I think
there's our laws.
I think it's a prudent suggestion myself, because we really, whether or not it would work out or not, we don't know. And the thought of having an alternative something besides the Clackamas River or interties with Lake Oswego, it's prudent to know what the potential is for that. So adding a recommendation that we look into that, we can't necessarily put a timeline on it, but
No.
I think it's I think it's a good addition.
So it could be a project that the Public Works Department could look into after adoption of this master plan as a
over
product
the
of
next
it.
decade before the next master plan review comes up, and then at that point you'd have an answer to that question, conceivably, or maybe, I just.
So to be clear, you're backing away from the idea of forced yielding of water rights, but it would be a suggestion or recommendation that the city look into purchasing those water rights one way or
Well,
the
I wouldn't
other.
even say water. I'd just say wells as a way to supplement our riverine water sources.
So
and whether it's
The recommendation would be for the city to look into the feasibility of supplementing the water supply with wells.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe, yeah. And I think that's enough to get us started in direction, because the whole how you acquire those is probably a conversation that we have. Yeah. Yeah.
Carrie, could you write up a
Sure.
recommendation for that?
I mean
I think Damon said it very carefully, and if somebody's
recording it.
recording it,
Actually, the
Right
chair said it pretty
Yeah.
well too,
Yeah,
and Damon went yes.
I wrote down part of it, but
Well, I think the recommendation would be that the city pursue whatever means would be feasible for obtaining water rights or providing.
Well, no, I
I think you had it
supplemental-
right the first time.
No, it's just that
Supplemental
the city explore
water.
the viability of adding well water sources
water
to our
sources.
supply.
Yeah, I think that's all you gotta
That's
say.
sufficient enough,
Yeah.
I think, to get us started.
I have city explore the feasibility of adding or acquiring well water sources.
Sounds good.
Well,
Yeah.
for- yeah.
Short.
Yeah. I think, that's simple enough.
You want to make that a motion?
Yes, I do.
I
Are there more questions?
I have another question. Do you know off the top of your head, if possible, what so we have a water master plan that was previously adopted, now we're looking at a new one. We have a sanitary sewer master plan, and does that come up sometime soon, or the
Yeah.
adoption of the previous one?
The sanitary sewer master plan, we've started collecting data to, in preparation to update the sanitary sewer master plan. We're going to be doing some flow monitoring this winter, wet weather flow monitoring, and I imagine that we'll actually have a contract and a scope of work to start working on the actual master plan update itself, probably late summer, next summer.
But the existing
fall.
one was adopted
Yeah.
when?
With the comprehensive plan in
It's a plan
2004.
of 2004, I
Okay,
believe.
and then what about the transportation? I know we're talking
Right
about.
now.
That's just getting started. It's on the web.
Yeah, the update is just
All right,
getting
so my
started.
so my my comment is that one of the flaws I see in adopting this in a vacuum is that really we've got 4 major public facilities that, while we can't engage them all at the same time, I understand because of staff resources and time and dollars, it seems to me that looking at each one of them individually in a box is not really helpful to the city. It's much better if we could somehow take a broader brush and look at them, because there is a cumulative effect of all those things. We're looking at, I'm sure that many of us know that a lot of the sewer lines are probably in some of the same situation and condition that the water lines are. So we've got that coming up, and there's going to be a financing plan for that. We've got water, which we've just discussed. We've got roadways, same situation. So while we're not really dealing with financing, there is an implication down the road that there's going to be this, I don't want to say big hit, but there is going to be substantial financial obligation in terms of the improvements needed for the future development or redevelopment of our community. And it's just really hard to look at each one of them individually without looking at, because they all affect one another. I mean, you're not going to want to go in and tear up all the roads to put in water lines or properties for water lines when you have to come back and do sewer lines, and then you've got roadway improvements. So somehow or another, there's got to be a better way for us to do this, and I don't have the answer to that.
Well, I think you were on track, but you left one key point out. They all affect the Oregon City taxpayers and ratepayers.
Well, I was saying that was the financial hit down the road.
And ideally, it would be great if the city had a global utility master plan, but I think
Almost like a comprehensive plan.
but they
It would
probably
seem-
don't have the resources to.
Yeah,
put
I don't know.
But if you can get them
Cities do that.
adopted, then they become the guiding document that we look at. I mean, if we've got an adopted master plan for water and sewer, I mean, Public Works does everything they can to make sure they're only going in there one time.
So I agree. But I mean, somehow or another, it would be, the cumulative effect seems to me, and I'm not saying cumulative being a negative thing. I'm just saying there's an overall,
Yep.
as you just said, an overall facility, somehow or another taking parts of those and putting together one document which addresses, on a higher level how all these things work together, because they are supposed to all work together with a comprehensive plan. I mean, I'm not putting parks in it because parks are important and they're critical, but we're talking about essential services. And parks, for some people, are an essential service, but, if the park got turned off tomorrow, it's not like water. You turn it off and then there's no more water. You can still go to the park.
Right.
Might not be as improved as you want it, but the open space in the land is still going to be there. It's a little different with these utilities and facilities. So just wanted that to be on the record that I liked you were thinking what I was thinking, some sort of a overall facilities document.
Well, I think once all of those master plans have been updated, essentially you have that in effect. And the reason I asked the question, if we can...
You actually
dis-
really don't,
if we
because you
can
still have to look at
disconnect-
each one of them. But something that sort of takes all of them and says, okay, here's the whole
Make one combined
here's the whole
document.
box of these services and how they, like I said, taking maybe executive summaries out of them somehow or another, so that you've got them in one spot, and then you have the supplement transportation plan, you have the water plan, you have the sewer plan that are appendices to those, but you've got some sort of documentation in terms of planning that you can deal with. And it's something we probably should talk about.
I'm wondering if I just took a poll of the commission, would there be a consensus that we could move forward and support the master plan without regard to the financing? Is that something we could all agree to?
Yeah, I think we said that last time, that we were uncomfortable with that.
So I guess I'd like to maybe to move things forward, entertain a motion that, including the motion that Damon made about the
Or he'd like to.
supplemental wells.
Yeah, I think that should be a separate motion from the recommendation to the City Commission to adopt the master plan and we further recommend that you do X. But I guess I would say that I'm supportive of us making a recommendation to the City Commission to recommend adoption of the water master plan. And then I want to say, and furthermore specifically, we are not making any recommendation with regard to the financing plan that's contained herein, I guess is what I would say.
So, do you move approval of the water master plan without regard to any financing options?
Yes.
And that's pretty much where I'm coming from.
Does that sound like a motion to me?
Yes, that was.
Okay. I second it.
The
Oh, I'm
finance
sorry.
plan
No.
chapter doesn't really have a recommendation on any
Right.
of the options. It just presents.
It's
Right,
just-
but,
it's
but
right.
we also kind of want to be on the record saying, when we adopt the plan, we're not adopting anything about financing.
It's not in
That-
consideration.
But it would be okay for us to explain that you looked at the financing options, you had questions about it, you understand that these are a range of options, that it is a larger policy discussion that needs to happen in terms of how those services are going to be paid for.
I guess
And we say good luck.
I guess the only thing is, I'd kind of like to have my recommendation be part of this specific recommendation rather than a separate item. I'd like it to be kind of part of the water master plan that they are exploring alternative water sources or wells.
Is that feasible? We can do that?
Got a first and a second. Someone has to withdraw.
Is it?
Someone would have
Because
to.
I'm a little more comfortable with it being a separate recommendation along with the water master plan, but if I've got consensus of my colleagues here, I'm willing to,
I was more comfortable with a separate also.
okay? So we have
Okay.
two separate.
I would agree.
Okay, I'll
can make
consider
it a-
myself overridden.
Okay.
Well, we can still make it
No, I
it's-
understand
we're
we're going to go
making-
with it. I just,
Tony will craft this recommendation for us in a nice little paragraph, and he'll say, and they moved this. And furthermore, they also made the recommendation to you, so forth and so on. So I'll call for the question if we're
So we've got a motion
ready
and
for the
a
question.
second.
this is the
Master
master
For the
plan.
master plan
Right.
without regard to the financing.
scene plan, right.
Commissioner, maybe,
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy.
Aye.
Chair Kidwell.
Aye.
All right, now, Mr. Maybe, your recommendation and for
This
approval.
motion for water wells.
Right. I move that the City of Oregon City explore the feasibility of adding well sources to the city's water sourcing.
Second. Okay, we're still thinking.
Commissioner Henkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe,
Aye.
Chair Kidwell.
Aye.
Good job, Damon.
So we
Rather
will.
have
Out there
fight
looking for
now
those
than
wells.
in 25 years when things are critical.
I know.
So this will. So we have a work session tomorrow afternoon at 5:30 with the City Commission to go focus on the water master plan.
Are
it-
any of you coming?
If I can. I'm starting a new job tomorrow, so.
If I can also.
I'm planning to be there.
Great.
I'm planning to be there. I asked for the time off.
Okay, thanks.
It is it's a legislative action, so you can talk about everything we talked about here tonight,
All right.
or anything else.
Well, we could maybe ask. Maybe they have questions as to why we made the motion the way we made it. So then we'd be able to answer that.
Yeah, and then this goes to the City Commission for their first hearing on January 18th of 2012. So that's when this will be brought forward for the next public hearing. So with that, that's all I think we have on the master plan. Thank you.
Do we have anything else on the agenda?
Update
That's
on
it.
Blue Heron?
Yep, I can give you a couple
Do some
updates.
communications, yeah.
Yep. We have one application in for the Planning Commission to fill the vacancy. We've just advertised it. We sent it one more round. We've asked for applications to be submitted by January 17th of 2012, at which time we'll fill that remaining seat on the Planning Commission, hopefully. So, if you know anybody
That's for
who'd
an
like to
unexpired
apply.
term.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
There's applications online under the Planning Department, or they can feel free to give us a call, and we can get them in application as well. At our January 9th, 2012 hearing, so our first hearing in January, we will have an annexation that night that you'll be hearing and making a recommendation on,
An annexation request.
Yeah,
Yep.
not an annexation.
Yeah.
an annexation request. Just to give you a heads up that there will be no meeting on the 26th, so we will not see you again until the
darn.
new year. My building official, Tom Hosey, who I hired about 16, 17 months ago, has was offered an opportunity to go be the building official and assistant public works director for the city of Houston. So he will be taking that opportunity for the 4th largest city in the country, and
I
so
understand that's sort of a lawless land out there. No planning.
I think that a lot falls to the building official. So we wish him well and appreciate the service that he has done. His last day will be the 19th, so we will be moving forward with the replacement there. For Blue Heron, we continue to work with Metro and our other stakeholders. As you may recall, the bankruptcy trustee extended the time for a bid to be submitted to the 14th of this month. So at this point, we're still reviewing a potential bid on the property, and we will see how that shakes out, how it's received, if we are able to get one in on time. So we continue to meet weekly with our stakeholder group in Metro, going over the site, trying to get some due diligence, make sure that we understand if we can identify any fatal flaws that say stop. So we're continually meeting on that and trying to get as much information as we can about the site as we get ready to hopefully make a bid on the property. So at this point, that's where all of our energy is going. We did have money for a visioning process. I am holding that until we figure out where we're at in this bid process, whether we're successful as a stakeholder, as public agencies, or if a private developer does come in and get it. I think that'll define how we're going to do and move forward with visioning and land use approvals on that site, if there are any. We have set up a NRI is the company that bought all the equipment on the site, so you will see some demolition going on the site, getting the tanks out of there, getting all the, pretty much anything that they can resell, recycle is going to be taken out. They have until, I believe, spring, summer of 2013 to be on the site, with options to both leave earlier or stay later, depending on how they're doing. We've set up a process working with the State Historic Preservation Office to document any buildings that are removed on the site and document some of the equipment. NRI has been very good to work with in terms of allowing us access to get to the site. We have had one building demolished that was needed. It was a 1970s almost a lean-to building that was put in. They had to take the cover off to get the tanks out that were there. So we've set up a process where we document the demolition, the location, write up a historic review form on it, and get pictures. And they're working with us to make sure that we can do that. And we actually worked with SHPO, and we've had last week, I believe it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we had a professional photographer out there with Christina Robertson Gardner, taking professional pictures of historic structures, equipment, anything else that we could find on the site.
Put the pictures up on the website?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're going to do with them at this point, how we're documenting it, what we're going to do with that, and creating forms from it. We just want to make sure we could get in there before before something else was as they're doing the demolition work. Yes, exactly.
And you go, well, what was that?
Once it's gone, it's gone.
The joys of digital photography is you can take 100,000 pictures, and it doesn't cost you any more than one. So
correct. Yeah. So, we are going to hopefully be able to get information out there to the best that we can with what we're allowed to release on a bid, how that process is going.
Is there a target date on when that's due?
We have to have it. We have to have it to the trustee by the 14th.
Of December?
Yes. So in 2 days.
In 2 days. Okay.
His timelines there aren't any. They can accept it. They can reject it. They can negotiate it. They can negotiate with multiple parties if there are multiple interested parties. There is no, okay, you submitted, the clock starts, you have 30 days. He has complete discretion on how this is run.
Including rejecting all
including
offers.
Rejecting, sending it out for additional bids, negotiating. The other side, the West Lynn side, you've probably seen in the paper, Clackamas County is potentially interested in that site through Water Environmental Services, and I believe that bid is on the same timeline that we're on. So hard to say how it'll move forward, but once we get that bid in there, if we do. That's kind of where we're at on Blue Heron.
Anything else?
You have a new economic development director?
Correct. Yeah, we have an economic development manager. His name's Eric Underwood. He was working on the urban renewal agencies over in Tualatin. So he started, about 3 weeks ago or so, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So been working closely with him on, we brought him in on Blue Heron. We're working with him on the Cove as well, working on the development disposition agreement, rewriting that with Clackamas Cove LLC. So we're bringing him up to speed on where that project's been, where we're at, how we're going to move that one
Can you
forward.
extend an invitation for him to attend?
Planning Commission?
Yep.
Certainly.
Would you guys like to have him come?
Sure.
Okay, all righty.
Yep, no problem there.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
Are we adjourned?
We are.
We are.
Already.
Thanks.